for Dr. J.
I mean, does this need to be moved?
No, you're fine.
Because I'm not. I mean, so I'm not speaking right into it then.
No, you want it off to the side just a little bit.
So you don't have any plosives.
Yes, it's. Yeah, I learned that from watching YouTube videos on how to do a podcast.
The same day you tried to learn how to play the violin.
No, the violin thing was a few years ago when I was drinking. So,
Well, I'm going to put this out there and see if it sticks, but it's possible that your drinking has something to do with your inability to play the violin.
And I think we've got the start of the video.
Okay.
Okay. I sound like the dog from Hanna-Barbera. What was the...
Oh, God, I don't remember.
You know, he always... So are you sure you don't want monitors? Because it's a whole different world over here.
But here, I would have to hear myself, though, right?
Yes.
Oh. Nah, thanks. I'm good. I watched myself recently when talking about masculinity and having to hear my voice. I don't know what people see in it or hear in it. I'm just like, I don't get it.
But here's the thing. Everybody on this planet feels the exact same way.
If the voice in my head were the voice that people heard, they'd like that a lot better.
Well, I think we've talked about that before. Because I've got like bogey up here in my head. But instead it comes out as, 16-year-old Anna.
Jeez. I was told I missed my calling as a DJ.
Because you have a face for radio.
You have a face for it. Shut up.
No.
Have we started? I mean, I think.
Oh yeah, we've
have.
already started.
The violin thing was our intro.
That's it. That's where I'm cutting it because that was fantastic.
Your moment of zen.
Yeah. Trevor still does that.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he still does. He still closes out the show with a moment of zen.
Do you remember the moment of zen that he did after 9/11?
No.
Puppies. He took a puppy out from under the desk.
Oh.
As your moment of zen. Because it was right after 9/11.
Yeah.
And he was trying to find... Because the show was not meant to be funny.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about The Daily Show.
No, we did not.
Well, too late now.
There were a lot of things. We didn't talk about Happy Days. We didn't talk about Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. We didn't talk about... there was another one I was thinking about the other day. I was like, damn, we didn't talk about that
My
one.
favorite Ren and Stimpy moment is when he's in the bath and he's got the bar of soap and he thinks it's an ice cream bar. I want to lick your creamy center. Ren and Stimpy was so good. We didn't talk about Pinky and the Brain.
We didn't talk about Pinky and the Brain. We didn't talk about Dallas.
Oh.
Yeah, even though, like, anybody our age would have never watched Dallas.
Your mama did.
The year that they shot JR, that's all you heard about.
Well, in the year that Bobby had died.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up and he's in the shower. It's the biggest ripoff of all time. It was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the thing you don't do. That's the thing they tell you not to do. Mm-hmm. Don't create a Deus Ex Machina with a dream. It was all a dream. Everyone's fine.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, but you do that if you're Newhart.
I'm still pissed about that.
We didn't talk about Quantum Leap.
Oh.
Which had, in my opinion, that's the greatest ending to a show.
You need to make a list next time.
Yeah.
Because now I'm thinking, what's going to happen today?
If I think, okay, so, and I've been thinking about today's show because obviously the knee-jerk reaction would be, well, we have to talk about all the indie and alternative bands, quote-unquote alternative. And by the way, we're going to get to the term grunge. Because I got a bone to pick with you.
Me? What did I do? I just showed up. I haven't even gotten a chance to talk about grunge.
But then I was thinking, I was like, but if all we do is talk about that, we will not talk about, we won't have the time to talk about the pop, and we won't be able to talk about, because being from the Southeast, country didn't show up in the early 90s with Garth Brooks. Country was there the whole time for us.
It was. Garth Brooks just made it a national phenomenon.
He did, between him and Shania. Those are the two big, well, and
one of them had talent, and it was Garth. I'm sorry, man. She had one kind of music she could do. She had exactly one song that she could do. She just happened to do it different ways.
But she was so hot doing it.
She was extraordinarily attractive. But Garth was...
Well, he's hot too.
He's a superstar.
He is.
I saw him at the state fair before he was popular.
Ezra started to laugh at me one day about Garth, and he rolled his eyes, and I said, you go back, you do whatever you got to do, but find the HBO special that Garth did.
Yep.
Watch that.
And No Fences. That album,
yeah.
It's got my favorite Garth Brooks song on it.
What's that?
Mama's in the graveyard, Papa's in the pen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think we've already started talking about country. Maybe we should do this one first then.
Yeah, I guess so, because here before Garth, I remember growing up, and of course I grew up here in the Triad. You grew up outside Raleigh, right?
Yes, I did. On a farm.
On a farm. Oh, then you got double dose. We had WTQR here. What did y'all have?
Let's see, 94.7 WQDR.
Okay.
QDR is a Raleigh station.
What is it with all the radio stations down there putting Durham and Raleigh into the call letters? Because RDU does the same thing.
Yes, it does. Was that 93.9?
Yeah.
WRDU?
No, 997, wasn't it? I can't remember.
I used to listen to it all the time, though.
Yeah. RDU is Raleigh's big rock station.
It was my first exposure to Tom Petty.
Yeah. And y'all also had G105, right?
We did. We don't talk about it, but we have it.
That was y'all's KZL, right?
You can get to talk. You want to talk about pop in the 90s, you have to talk about radio stations like that.
Yeah, like G105.
Was Kiss FM around then?
Kiss FM was around back then. Okay, so here in the Triad, so here's the history of the Triad. Because my mom was a huge radio listener, and so I remember all these different freaking radio stations. Originally, you had Rock 92. This is, when I say originally, I'm talking about as far back as I can go in my head. You had Rock 92, Z93 was the pop station, and TQR. That was the country station. Of course, Rock 92 was the quote-unquote classic rock station. And then KZL came on, and then shortly after KZL was Kiss FM, which was 98.7, and Kiss FM was the more I'm trying to think of the word. I can't word here lately. It was the more ferocious.
That I was going to mention that during our talk. That the pop that comes out of the 90s is in fact ferocious.
But during the 80s, Kiss FM was the one that you would hear the metal bands on Kiss FM alongside Michael Jackson and Prince.
We didn't have Kiss in where I grew up that I recall.
Right.
I don't recall ever having it.
Yeah, it was a Triad station. What is now Simon used to be Kiss FM.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep. And it was of the two pop stations, it was more abrasive, I guess you would say. They would play riskier music than KZL would. And then Z93 went off the air, and then they came back as Oldies 93. And now I think they're The Wolf, or am I thinking of 94.5? I can't remember. But then in the mid-90s, we got Rock 94.5, the Rock Alternative, and shortly after that, we got 106.5 out of Charlotte. and that's the one I still listen to.
Wow.
Yeah.
You could do a whole show on radio.
Yeah, we could. But it would be regional. You know? Because Charlotte also had 99.7 The Fox.
Well, but these radio stations are all owned by how many different corporations? Not many.
Not many. Well, now, not many. Back then, there was a lot of independent owners. Like TQR was... TQR and SJS were owned by the same company, and that was it. And now I don't know who owns TQR now, but there's like 4 or 5 under the umbrella that TQR's in.
It's an oligopoly, man. I mean, that's where national radio is, which is why if you go from state to state, from region to region, radio is exactly the same.
Yeah,
because their choices have been severely limited.
Well, I remember Clear Channel was the first major company to come in, and now they're owned by iHeart.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like all the Clear Channel stations around here are iHeart stations. And it's gotten to the point where me and the boys can predict what station is going to do what each weekend because they have these themed weekends. And so if Magic 99.5 decides they're going to do an 80s weekend, it's going to be a 90s weekend on 106.5.
And you're always right, I'm assuming.
Yep.
And see, that's a lack of imagination, and that's something they can't choose anymore. It's just like national media.
No, DJs are just pushing a button now. They're not changing the disc or anything.
I don't listen to radio much anymore.
When I was DJing up in Boone, now granted this was an AM station, but it was easy listening. And we had a list of songs we could play, but what we played and when we played them was up to us.
You were a DJ
at an easy listening station. I was the evening DJ. When I would go off the air, I had to shut everything down because I was the last one on the air. And I'd work like 3 nights a week. And during my tenure there, I didn't work there long, but during my tenure there, we broadcast the World Series between the Angels and the Giants. Because we were one of ESPN's
affiliates.
Yep. So, and that was easy because all I had to do was like every half hour just go on and do the call letters and give a weather update.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, you're like the quintessential grunge kid. I mean, how old were you then?
I was in my early 20s.
Yeah,
I had a wife and kid. It was a part-time gig. They ran an ad on Appalachian's campus. And I answered the ad, and like 2 of us got picked. The other guy that got picked was actually in the radio program, and he did stuff for the radio station that I was working at. Plus, he did stuff for the school's radio station. So it was just part-time gig.
Wow.
We'd work like 15 hours a week, maybe 20 sometimes. I have to do commercials. Come on down to Bill's Tire.
Was that your radio voice?
Yeah. I had to really bring it down some. And because it was easy listening, you can't get excited. You have to talk in a very monotone style and keep your volume level. So when you talk about the weather, you have to say it's 65 degrees and clear with a chance of rain tomorrow.
Yeah, but what do you do if there's severe weather? I mean, you got to stay calm when you talk about the fact there's a tornado warning.
So there's a tornado on King Street right now, and if you're there, make sure that you get to shelter immediately. Now here's Olivia Newton-John.
Or Celine Dion.
Or Celine Dion. The one that I love to play old Elton John.
Oh.
So, but you could only play... Like, if you're going to pick an artist, you could only play 1 song per hour. So all my stuff was like, because I would only be on the air for like 4 hours, I'd have like Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. On
an easy listening station?
Because it was on our list.
How is that an easy listening song?
Crocodile Rock.
None of that's easy listening.
Well... I know that, but
that's rock.
It was on our roster, and I was like, I'm doing it. And so I would play stuff like that, and they would have I would always feel like I was, a renegade when I would play Vogue by Madonna, but it was on the list, and I would play it.
I think the owners of the station didn't know what easy listening meant.
And it was funny because during my training, I had to come in and sit in on a morning show, and they had their own little morning show. Remember, this is AM radio. I probably had like 3 listeners, not including my ex-wife.
I didn't know it was AM.
Yeah, it was AM radio.
Oh,
We
wow.
were a sister affiliate to a big country station up there.
Isn't talk radio mostly on AM?
Yeah. And the country station, it was funny because the AM radio station was back in the corner, like the booth was back in the corner, and then the country station was right beside it. In the AM radio station, you walk in, and you had this nice desk and all these chairs, right? You walk into the country booth, not a single place to sit down. They did everything standing up. And their stuff was pre-programmed. So the DJs would come in, talk, do their promos, and after like an hour of doing all that, they would walk back out. And I'm sitting there for 4 hours playing Elton John and Olivia Newton-John and Mariah Carey.
Because you're AM.
Cause, man,
But they were FM, I'm assuming.
they were FM. And everything was programmed. And I would have to double by doing their weather.
Wait, and where was this?
This was up in Boone. Yeah.
I did not know that
The high
about you.
country. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yep.
That's cool.
No, it's not. I was on an AM.
You don't have to tell it that way. You don't have to frame it that way. That goes on your CV.
Right.
Is it on your CV?
No.
Dumbass.
It's on my resume, not on my CV.
Oh, well, you don't have to tell people that
Yeah.
it's AM. You just tell people you were a radio DJ.
Which doesn't get you anywhere anymore. That's the point of this. Well, not the point of this conversation, but
It might as well be. We've talked about it for the past 10 minutes.
all this because we started with Garth Brooks.
I don't know.
But I think it's an important thing to point out that, and I mentioned this last week when we were talking about 120 minutes, we listened to a lot more radio back then.
We did.
And the majority of our music came from the radio.
Well, because you couldn't afford to buy all the CDs you wanted.
Yeah.
So you had a couple of choices. You had MTV.
Mm-hmm.
If you were older, you had VH1.
Mm-hmm.
If you were wanting to listen to country, I don't know, did CMT exist then in the 90s?
Yeah.
But most people were
Mid-90s.
still, I think, listening to the radio.
Yeah, for the most part.
I mean, Garth Brooks.
Well, even going back to the 80s, where that culture begins. That idea of listening to the radio, because remember, I don't know if you ever did this, but I had a little boombox with a tape deck,
Oh yeah,
and you would sit there and listen to the radio and tape songs off the radio.
absolutely.
And the worst was when the stupid DJs wouldn't shut up at the beginning of the song.
Yep, I would tape whole radio shows
Yeah.
for an hour, 2 hours at a time, and then listen to the songs I'd gotten, because the money. I mean, it doesn't make sense to younger listeners who can just, because now you don't buy CDs, songs drop,
Yeah.
and you get them on MP3 on something like Apple Music or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then to buy a CD, unless you are part of one of those CD clubs,
Yeah.
was it Columbia who did like 5
Columbia,
cents for a CD?
BMG. I mean, there was a whole host of them.
Yeah, but I never got on that particular train.
Oh, I did.
So for me, I mean, I didn't buy a lot of CDs, and the ones I did buy were mostly classic rock, because
Yeah.
I split my allegiance between classic rock and 90s rock,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly grunge, which apparently you have a bone to pick with me.
We're going to talk about that term later.
It's a problematic term, but I think
Yeah.
it does tell you something about the music itself.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the unrefined nature of a lot of it, which is what I like about it.
Right.
We can hold off on that.
We're going to get to, I promise, we're going to get to the 90s. I swear to God. Because you have to talk about the 90s. But I didn't want us to leave the 80s behind like they didn't happen, because one of the earliest records I ever bought was Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. I loved that record.
That's a great record.
And then our next door neighbor, who was, I was, 7, 8 years old. He was 12. He made a copy of London Calling for me.
That was the first time you heard the album?
Yeah.
That's a great album.
So, but I also had Thriller. And that's the thing. I didn't want us to leave that behind because of all the kids that had a copy of Nevermind, I promise you, they had Thriller too.
Of course they did. Our musical taste was eclectic.
Yeah.
And in the South, our musical taste included, so you would listen, in any given day, you would listen to Michael Jackson, George Strait.
Yeah. Alabama.
Leonard Skinner, and Nirvana.
Yeah.
And Stone Temple Pilots, and Alice in Chains, and George Jones, and Loretta Lynn, and Eddie Rabbit, and
Ricky Skaggs.
Ricky Skaggs.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. We got to talk about bluegrass.
We got to talk about bluegrass because of North Carolina. I mean, and being in the heart of NASCAR country, a lot of that country music infiltrated our everyday lives, unlike other areas of the country, which I think makes. But you could say that that hip hop infiltrated New York and L.A. in ways that it didn't infiltrate other parts of the country. I think that's one of the more interesting things about our generation and our eclectic tastes. And one of the things that really aggravated me during that whole alternative music period was this: if you weren't alternative, you were not cool, and you had to be all in. Like, you couldn't admit, even though everybody had it, you could not admit that you liked Thriller.
Well, it's not cool to do that.
Yeah.
I was told, because I loved Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
And I liked a lot of their older stuff, and I was told that that's not okay by a classmate.
Yeah, because it's a hair band.
It was a hair band, but I was listening to. Well, actually, no. This was late '80s, so we hadn't yet arrived at grunge.
Right.
But it was because it was older Guns N' Roses. I'm like, why does the fact that it's older have anything to do with its cool factor?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't listening to the most current music, which was still hair bands.
Yeah.
But I didn't like where a lot of the music was going.
Well, and the thing is, people, they love to pile on to Cinderella and Poison, but I remember when Cinderella and Poison came out, and everybody loved them.
Oh yeah,
everybody loved. When Open Up and Say Ah came out, several of my friends had copies of that album, and they thought it was the best thing ever. And then you fast forward literally 5 years, and they're putting as much distance as they can between themselves and that album. And to me, that was so hypocritical.
It's fun music.
It is.
And that should be, but it's almost a certain level of snobbery.
It is.
That I don't think grunge meant to create.
Yeah.
But grunge created kind of a grunge snob culture. It's like hipsters.
Say it one more time.
Grunge snob culture. It's weird because that's not what grunge was about.
No.
But that's what grunge did. Is it put you in a place where you felt like you had to make choices.
Yeah. Political choices.
Oh yeah.
It was ridiculous. And even though, and I went along with it. I think every one of us went along with it because we were too afraid to be labeled. So yeah. But I remember deep down thinking, this doesn't make sense. My ex-wife and I had what we called our dirty stash. And our dirty stash was, I had a copy of NSYNC and she had a copy of Britney Spears. And they stayed in the top of the closet.
But Britney Spears is fun too.
It is. But back then, and this is the early 2000s. This is like late 90s, early 2000s. We're still under that bubble of we can't let people know.
No, I have a friend who was in her 30s and her guilty pleasure was Outkast in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And she didn't like to talk about it. Because she was all kind of hardcore.
Right.
Like, rave music, hardcore. And in that culture. and she liked 90s music too, but mostly 90s alternative and grunge. Right. So she can't admit that. I'm surprised she admitted it to me, given that I grew up in the 90s and grunge culture and alternative rock culture. I mean, how the hell did that happen?
I don't know. And the thing is, you have guys like Billy Corgan come along who, and Kurt has a lot to do with this too. They came along and they solidified it. They promoted it.
Well, I think their reasons were different.
Well, and with Kurt, what was always funny with Kurt was everybody would always talk about, like, and they would say it so shocking. He loved the Beatles, and that's shocking. Why is that shocking? My personal belief, if you don't like the Beatles, there's something wrong with you.
I agree with that.
There's something
whether you like the late or early or both.
Or both, yeah.
You gotta like some of it.
At some point, you've been hooked by the Beatles.
I can't trust a person who doesn't like the Beatles. Like, you know.
Well, you know, when I was single, one of the things that I would ask in those initial text messages we're texting back and forth was the Beatles Stones test. Which do you think is better? And if they said Stones, I'm like, I don't know.
Although the Stones are great.
They are great, but
they're not the Beatles.
No.
They didn't experiment in the same way. The Beatles pushed the envelope in ways that nobody else did.
They single-handedly restructured the industry for 30 years.
So we can get to grunge now, but I'll say this, and then you can apparently jump on me for something I don't remember saying. I think what they're reacting to is not the same thing in hairband music. Is not the same thing that we were reacting to. They're reacting to the fact that music had become so overproduced, misogynistic. It was misogynistic.
It was very it objectified the female.
Girls and drugs.
Yeah. Sex,
drugs, rock and roll.
Yeah. Vince Neil put it the best, and Vince Neil is the lead singer of Motley Crue, by the way. And I wanted to talk about that too.
We still can.
Well, no, we'll move on. But anyway, Vince Neil said it best when he was like, you know, the difference between the music from LA and the music from Seattle is designed to make you think. LA is designed to get you away from that, so that you can just take a break. He said if they're working, this is the way he put it, if they're working 40-hour jobs and their only release, their only break is to come see Motley Crue do a show on Friday night, then I don't care what I'm singing about. It's their break. It's their release. And they chose to come join me in it. And that's how he dealt with critics about Motley Crue's content. He said it's one of many different ways that people can take a break. I was like, that is probably the best answer I've ever heard.
It is. It doesn't change the fact that it took music into a place that it was, without grunge, music would have hit a dead end.
Yeah.
Because there was nowhere to take it.
Well, before Kurt, we're at the end of the Power Ballad. The Power Ballad was dying, which is the last gasp of the LA rock scene. And we've got this weird hybrid version of hip-hop, R&B, and pop in someone like MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice and all this. That's what is out there. And the R&B swooner bands, right? Like Color Me Bad and After 7 and those groups. The new kids on the, or not new kids on the block. We didn't even talk about New Kids on the Block. We don't need to.
No, we're going to move on.
We're going to move on.
I wish you'd never even said their name.
Well, no, I was thinking last night because Lauren and I were talking about her toys, and New Kids came up because she had a New Kids on the Block doll.
Yeah.
And I remembered, and I didn't bring it up in that, but I remembered the summer of 1987 when we got Guns N' Roses, we got Def Leppard's Hysteria, and New Kids on the Block hit. That all happened that same summer, and I'll never forget that summer because of that.
It was a busy summer.
It was. So, but anyway, all right. So fast forward. So let me.
What did I say? I mean,
it's a pet peeve of mine.
I just showed up, and
it has been a pet peeve of mine ever since I met you. The term grunge.
Yes.
Because I love you to death, but you throw that around so willy-nilly, it's like...
For me, it's not just a type of music, though. It's a time period.
Okay. And and I think
it's a certain 4-year time period where
right.
a lot of that music is coming out of the same scene.
Yeah.
Even when it's departing from it.
Yeah.
Because there's certain groups that are not grunge. Stone Temple Pilots is not grunge.
Well, neither is Alice in Chains.
Neither is Alice in Chains.
There is, and it's hilarious because there is a classic clip of Jerry Cantrell, the bassist and the drummer of Alice in Chains, all three walking down the beach doing an interview.
Yep.
And the interviewer asked them as they're walking something along the lines of, so which bands would you consider grunge? And Cantrell's response is none of them. Like none of us.
He didn't like the term.
None of them like the term because, and he actually expounded on that a little bit by noting that none of them actually sounded the same. And I think one of the things about that term is it got hijacked.
It did.
By the corporate structure.
It did.
And it was rebranded and resold.
For me, it's less a genre than a 4-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And it coincides with the career of Nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that there's only one grunge group.
I would say there's two.
Who would be the other one?
Mudhoney.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Mother Love Bone.
Yeah, but are they grunge or are they polished rock? Because if you listen to that record,
their lyrics are grunge.
Yeah.
The music's polished.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with the term. I don't disagree with you. For me, it's not. You can't characterize anyone as grunge, but you can say that there is a 4 to 5 year time period mm-hmm. where music went through a radical shift.
It did.
And that's the spirit of grunge.
Yeah.
Is this pushing against everything that came before.
Now I'm happy.
Yeah.
Now you can say grunge all you want.
You can't. How could you even make a claim that these groups sound the same?
Yeah. Well, and I have a problem with the term alternative, and that's the one I kind of default to, is the idea of the alternative.
Because the music of that time period they're so rebellious mm-hmm. that they refuse to form a school.
Yeah.
Or a movement.
Yeah.
The only thing they have in common is they hate what came before.
The corporate. Yeah.
The corporate, you said it, misogynistic, mm-hmm. materialistic,
mm-hmm.
hair bands.
Yep.
That's what they have in common. Whereas if you listen to Alice in Chains and Nirvana, the commonality is the lyrics are just weird.
Right.
And STP. The lyrics are weird.
They're very abstract.
They are very abstract. If you could make a claim, that's how they're similar. But
right.
The musical style,
mm-hmm.
no one sounds like Alice in Chains.
Nobody sounds like Pearl Jam.
No one sounds like Pearl Jam. No one sounds like STP. No one sounds like Nirvana.
Even though Creed tried.
Oh Lord. So no, it's not a musical style. It's a time period. Mm-hmm. It's a 4-year period or 5-year period that you could demarcate between when Nirvana first hit and his suicide.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's...
Well, I would say that it actually, and this has been my argument for 20 years, it ends with Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which is the last really good Corgan album where it matches that feeling that happened. And I think that's where it stops, because by that point, Dave Matthews is on top. Alanis Morissette is on top.
Yep.
And it's the last really great album from the Pumpkins that demonstrates those ideals that came out of that period.
When did Throwing Copper come out?
It came out 3 weeks after he shot himself.
So would you say that's also a part of that movement?
No.
You think it's a sea change?
Post. Yeah.
Okay.
It's post.
But they're still rejecting the same stuff.
Yeah. It's just what happens is that it gets away from it gets away from critiquing. It's a different view of critiquing the culture. Because if you look at, all right, so look at Throwing Copper. The very first single we get off Throwing Copper is the song that to love a God, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what is the name of that song?
I can't remember.
But the ending refrain is, we won't be scarred like that. We won't be, you know, and so there's a new mentality. But then you fast forward to Alanis and Radiohead when they put out, because their next one's the Bends. So, and you have it's the same ironic mentality, but they're coming at it from a different angle than what they did.
Well, Radiohead is art. It's conceptual. It's designed to challenge, again, everything that came before.
Right.
In some ways, they have a lot more in common with the Beatles,
right,
than a lot of their other, because they didn't think in terms of songs. They thought in terms of whole albums.
Right.
Which is a Beatles mentality. And their music was experimental. It was edgy. And the lyrics, just like the grunge lyrics before, that first 4 years, the lyrics were just weird.
Yeah.
I, Robot. What's the name of that album? No.
OK Computer.
OK Computer. Sorry, I, Robot's a movie. OK Computer is a weird, complex, edgy, pushy, experimental album.
It's wonderful.
And again, it rejects the same stuff. It is not corporate rock.
No.
And it's not designed just to listen to for fun.
Yeah.
It requires you to use your brain.
But Alanis, so the thing about Alanis and Jagged Little Pill is she's not pushing back against corporate rock. She's pushing back against the culture itself.
Yes.
I mean, the whole thing about You Ought to Know is we're getting, now we had it before, we'd had that point of view before with Pat Benatar, but it was Disneyized.
It was.
You know, and even with Madonna, it's watered down.
Yes.
But she comes right out and it's ugly, it's nasty, it is in your face.
It's bitter.
It's very bitter.
And it's wonderful.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. And that's the beauty of Live Through This, because when you look at Courtney's lyrics on that album, it's very bitter.
Yep.
She's pushing back.
Women had not had an opportunity to really occupy that space.
No.
And suddenly women had a voice, and it was angry. And as a result, it was raw and it was real, and they are rejecting a male-centered culture, which is why it's so, and it's hard for, I think, a younger audience to understand why this was so shocking. But we had never heard anything like her before. No. The whole album, or
Melissa Etheridge,
or
the Indigo Girls.
Well, and there's an added component to her.
Yeah.
For when she comes out, you start thinking about all of her songs entirely differently.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're listening to her music for the first time again.
Yeah.
Because she comes out after I don't even know when she came out, but it was after a lot of these really big songs for her had come out. Oh.
Yeah.
So no, she's really good at advocating for an LGBTQ plus agenda before that term even existed.
Yeah, and around the same time she comes out is when Ellen came out.
Yes. It's see that, yeah. So we have to talk about the women.
Yeah. Because
the women are not, and you're right, Pat Benatar, but Pat Benatar is also very corporate and overproduced, even though she's trying her best not to be. Yeah. I don't know if I think she had limited options. I don't think she had much in the way of choice for her music.
She did what she could, with what she had. And the same thing with Madonna. We always talk about how groundbreaking Madonna was, and she was. Because she was pushing, what Madonna's pushing is the idea of sexuality. How women fit into that scope of sexuality and pushing those boundaries. But if you listen to the lyrics that she's actually presenting, especially in the mid to late 80s, it's not what we're getting in the mid 90s after he dies.
No.
And
No.
without his career, you're not going to get those voices. That's the sad thing. It took him tearing down the wall for them to be able to come through and really express. Because they'd been there. I mean, if you go back and listen to the Sonic Youth records of the mid to late 80s, Kim Gordon is doing that stuff 10 years before it became popular. You know? But, excuse me, it takes Nirvana breaking those boundaries down. And that's why they're so important. Because it's not just because they were super popular. They're important because we got a ton of really great voices out of it.
Yep.
That we would have never gotten. Because the corporate machine would have found the next hot scene and moved on. And Seattle just basically exploded onto their laps. But the two unintentional results end up happening. The underground becomes the popular. And this is why I have a problem with the term alternative. The alternative became the mainstream.
It did.
So it's no longer the alternative. What are you alternative to? And we were making that argument back in the 90s.
Well, because now record labels realized they could cash in on this.
They could cash in on it. And the second, the bad thing that happens, the really bad thing is, by 95, the major labels had gone through and just gobbled up all those independent record labels.
Yep. That's why that first 4 years is so important.
Yeah.
Because they don't the major,
they were caught on their heels.
The major labels had no idea what to do with it.
Yeah.
They had no idea what to do with it. They had these really refined
MTV
artists.
didn't know what to do with it.
No, MTV I think becomes itself because of that 4 years.
Yeah.
Is it 91 is when Nevermind comes out?
September of 91.
Yeah. Happy birthday to us, you know.
Mm-hmm. I know, right?
It was that moment. I told you last time we talked about this. That moment of, and you got to tell your story.
I'm going to.
It's as good, if not better, than mine.
I think we all have those stories, though.
I mean, for me, it was standing in my friend Chad's living room. We were both guitarists, and we were writing music and singing, and we were just hanging.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that opening progression of "Smells Like Teen Spirit," I had to sit down because I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
I've never heard. Is this music? What's going on here?
Yeah, we all kind of had that reaction. What is that?
Yeah, but yours is good because it's such. It swings from one extreme to another within a matter of seconds.
Yeah, but that was the radio at that time. Like we were talking about.
Tell your story. Yours.
So I was at East Surrey High School every year during homecoming. They do a freshman sophomore dance the weekend before homecoming. So the freshmen and sophomores are not left out because you can't go to homecoming if you're a freshman or sophomore. So, well, they did when I was there. So I go and we're down the field house, and I had this little girl that I don't know if you call it dating. Do you really date somebody who has a sophomore in high school?
You're going out.
Yeah, but we had a song, and our song was "Rub You the Right Way" by Johnny Gill.
Oh my Lord.
And so I go to the DJ and I requested it, and he's like, sure. And so then they play it, and we're dancing and just having a good time. And at the end of "Rub You the Right Way" by Johnny Gill, it fades out. And the first time I ever heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit" was at that moment. It was and it was the biggest juxtaposition. And not everyone there, but most of the kids that were there had never heard it. The ones that had heard it had seen the video. Because it wasn't playing on our radio stations at that point. And so it starts playing, and a lot of us just kind of stopped dead in our tracks because, like, what is this? And then it kicks in, and it's like, oh.
Did you like it right away?
I was intrigued by it right away. When I saw the video, because it's one of those moments, and it's weird because a lot of times I question human memory. I remember thinking, this is unique. This is interesting. Like the first time I ever heard "Good Vibrations" by the Beach Boys, I thought, this is interesting. This is unique. I didn't have that shining moment of this is the greatest pop song ever written, right? Because that's still my argument. It is the greatest pop song ever written. Argue with me. So
I think the reason,
but I think in time you start to realize the greatness. And with "Smells Like Teen Spirit," it caught me so off guard at that moment, and I think it caught a lot of people off guard that we had to have, okay, let me get a second helping of that. Let me hear that again.
Smells Like Teen Spirit and the first experience of that's like the first of a beer you ever took.
Yeah.
Either you really love it or you really hate it. Well, I take it back. At first, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. And that was the feeling. What is that? And then but again, it was, give me a second helping.
Yeah, I had to
give me
process
another
it.
one. Yeah, and I think we all did because we couldn't believe what we were hearing.
And then you heard another one. You know the second tune they put out? I don't remember.
It was In Bloom.
That's just as hard to get your head around.
It was Smells Like Teen Spirit, In Bloom, Come As You Are.
And by the time we get to Come As You Are, people had already started to make sense of it.
Oh yeah. And then Lithium was the last one.
And when is it named grunge?
At the very moment, at inception. And the thing is, like, Pearl Jam had put out 10 like a month and a half before, and they were running a really bad video of Oceans. Around the time that Smells Like Teen Spirit hit, they started playing Alive.
And now Pearl Jam's your group.
Yeah.
That's your favorite.
That's my boy.
For me, it's Nirvana.
Yeah. Well, and I wrote an article years and years ago. The argument for it was on his 10th anniversary of his death, so it was like 2004, and making a case for what has happened since Kurt's death, and making a case for how he had been ahead of the curve. Because I remember when I Know You're Right came out on the 10th anniversary of his death, and they're playing it on rock radio, and it sounds like everything else on rock radio. It's like this dude wrote this 10 years ago. And it sounds like Linkin Park. It sounds like the stuff, that they're playing now. It fits right in. It flowed right with it. Like there was nothing had changed. He was that far ahead. So I was making that argument. But one of the things I said in the introduction was, I was part of the Pearl Jam camp. My best friend in high school, he was part of the Alice in Chains camp. We hung out with people who were with Smashing Pumpkins and Rage Against the Machine and Tool. And we all had our group, but all of us had a copy of Nevermind.
Yeah.
We all had that album.
Because it's foundational.
It is.
It's like the Bible.
It's the gateway.
It's the drug.
It's the drug. It's the gateway that gets you into the rest of it. And, last week when we were talking about 120 minutes, it's not until Nirvana that it clicks with me that what I've been watching on 120 minutes since 7th or 8th grade is what he's promoting. It didn't register because I just thought it was just quirky music.
Yeah, but this is why he's a pioneer.
Yeah.
Because he was hearing things that nobody else was really hearing, and he was able to tap into that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, I want to watch the video again of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah.
Because it was so.
Well, the video itself wasn't like anything we'd ever seen. There were no videos on MTV that looked remotely like Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Well, no, but it's.
And if you look at the early Pearl Jam and Soundgarden videos, they're performance videos. But they're not in a gymnasium where you have cheerleaders with an anarchy symbol on their unitards. They're from performances.
That's right.
But here they come out. It's a pep rally gone to hell.
Well, he sets the tone.
Which goes back to the Ramones.
It does. And he sets the tone with that video for what videos can do.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you see a good example of a video that's just bizarre. Mm-hmm. Is Interstate Love Song by STP. and I love them, but they're just stealing. That was their gift. Is they didn't borrow anything. They just stole it. Well, we like what you did there, and we like that, and we're going to put them together.
David Spade on Spade in America, when they started to get big, he says, Stone Temple Pilots, very cool band, but I liked them better the first time when they were called Pearl Jam. But
the video for Interstate Love Song is so weird.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense with the lyrics. Because you don't see a single train in that video. And it's like, but you sing about a train. But the song is called Interstate Love Song, and you got this guy who's Scott driving this old beat up hoopty down the interstate. And it's just these strange kind of non sequitur moments in all of these wonderful videos.
Yeah.
And Nirvana makes it possible. I don't know who directed that video. I don't know who conceptualized that video. I don't know if it was Kurt.
No, well, I don't. So the story is, so they picked the worst video director they could find because they thought it was funny. And this guy had like the worst reel in the world. And so they pick him. And I don't know who came up with the idea of the high school. I'm sure if you asked Ezra, he could tell you everything about it.
He's a big Nirvana fan.
So this is, okay, going into adulthood, this is where Gen X actually is awesome. I went and bought a little black Civic, right? And when Sarah and I originally bought our Chevy S10 Blazer, when we went to pick it up, Lucas rode back with me in the S10 Blazer. So when I picked
your kid,
yeah. So when I bought the Civic, Ezra rode with me to go to get the car and bring it back. And he's like 3, right? Now, he has always had an ear for loud, obnoxious rock and roll, right? All the way down. But I remember that's the day when it clicked with me that Smells Like Teen Spirit was something special to that little boy, because I played it in the new car that we just picked up, and he's got this big grin and he's trying to sing along and he doesn't know the words, but he's so I hit repeat and he went through it again, and he has absolutely loved that song ever since.
And Nirvana as a whole?
As a whole, yep. Yeah, when he first started playing guitar, all he knew were Nirvana songs, and I had to sit him down a couple of times and tell him, you've got to learn something else besides Nirvana. Because that's all he was learning. That's all he was teaching himself was Nirvana songs. Wow. I'm like, dude, you got to reach out. So now he's expanded. He's learning all kinds of different stuff. And he's also discovered Jerry Cantrell. He loves Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains.
One of my son's best friends, if not his best friend, I was talking about grunge with him and my son, and he doesn't like grunge. He likes prog rock.
Right.
And I'm like, what's wrong with grunge? He's like, and I never thought about it this way before, but he's not wrong. He said it's far too suicidal. and when you go into that 4 years and listen to the music, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Man in the Box.
Well, Man in the Box is about Jerry Cantrell's dad being a POW in Vietnam.
It is, and it's dark.
Yeah.
And you don't feel good, and you got to keep all the sharp objects away from you when you listen to it.
Well, what, Pearl Jam had Black?
They did.
Sheets of Empty Canvas.
Nirvana had every single song they sang.
That's not true. About a girl.
That's the only happy song I think they have.
Polly has a great outcome.
That's true.
Because, and I mentioned this on the one that came out yesterday, about how she feigned Stockholm Syndrome to get out from under this guy. And it worked.
With Kurt, though, I think he's writing from a very dark place almost the entire time he's writing this music.
They all are. I mean, Eddie reads an article about a kid shooting himself in front of his,
and then writes
Jeremy.
Then you already mentioned Man in the Box.
Yeah, Man in the Box, and then let's see what else. Hey Man, Nice Shot.
Oh,
Mighty K. Four Squirrels wrote a wonderful song called Mighty KC, and it's all about finding out that Kurt has died. Yep. Yeah, it's very dark.
Pumpkins, everything. But despite all my rage,
yeah, I'm still just a rat in a cage.
which is great, because the song is about how futile your anger is. I mean, yeah, that's the only emotion you can really experience anymore.
Yeah,
but it doesn't do anything.
When I was when I had my own place up in Pilot, in between high school and college, during that wonderful 3 years, there was one night some girls were coming over to hang out, and when they got there, I was playing Mayonnaise from Siamese Dream, And I was so happy because I'd been trying to figure this song out for the past couple of days, and I finally figured it out, and I'm playing along, and I'm just so excited. And this one of the girls walks in, and she's like, "Why are you playing that depressing song?" And I'm like, "It's not depressing." And then I got to listen. I was like, "Man, this is depressing." Well, Disarm.
Yeah.
You know, even though the opening lyric is "Disarm you with a smile," he's talking about how he's never going to measure up. Nope. And it's just like, oh.
But I think that's one of the reasons it spoke to us.
Yeah.
Because the music that had come before, and that's the other
with
thing.
the exception of Guns N' Roses.
With the exception of Guns N' Roses, the music that came before it was extraordinarily frivolous.
And maybe Skid Row, because if you listen to Skid Row,
Well,
like
Skid Row,
18
in Life is dark.
Yeah.
It's dark, and but the music of the time was so frivolous. Mm-hmm. Whereas the lyrics of the 90s and with rock or grunge or alternative or whatever the hell you want to call it.
Rock. It's just rock.
It's so,
you know?
It's so substantial, and there's so much going on, and it is an intellectual pursuit to make sense of those lyrics.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to understand.
Yeah. We did.
And at the time, if you asked me, and I was in high school, but I was obviously sucked into literature. Mm-hmm. If you were to ask me to try to interpret "Smells Like Teen Spirit," I would laugh at you and say, I got nothing.
Well,
now I could.
Yeah.
Then.
Oh, yeah. Back then, no. And the thing is like we bring up, I talk about "Smells Like Teen Spirit" when I'm trying to explain poetry, and I give them the chorus.
Just the lyrics.
Just the chorus.
Oh.
Not even the verses, just one chorus, right? With the lights out, it's less dangerous. And I stop there and I'm like, what is he talking about? Here we are now, entertainments. What is he talking about?
I feel
stupid and contagious. What is he talking about? And once I get them to actually fill in the blanks, I'm like, now you're ready to read poetry.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
I wonder what he was reading.
He was reading. I don't.
Ask your kid; he'll know.
Well, okay, so I know that Pennyroyal Tea is based on a novel that he absolutely loved, but I don't know the name of that novel. And Ezra knows the name of the novel. Ezra's actually the one that told me about that one.
So maybe your son's love for Nirvana is a little unhealthy.
Yeah. Well, he wants to recreate the 90s.
Good luck.
It was funny, like last Halloween, he wanted to go as Eddie Vedder. And he was like, what do I do? Eddie Vedder from the 90s. And he was like, I don't know, got any suggestions or whatever?
Get the
and I'm
best
like,
flannel shirt
I
you
said,
can.
No, I looked at him and I said, just dress like your father.
You have flannel shirts?
I do. He's got my flannels.
Okay.
He's got them.
And the Baja sweaters?
They're long gone. I don't have any more Baja sweater, but I do have a ton of hoodies.
We went to the beach a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and we went into one of those beach shops, and they had a whole rack of them.
Did you see? Well, I remember when she and I went to do that, where she had to go and do that wedding. We went into a little surf shop. And
What is it with
the Baja sweaters, man? The surfers love them.
My son loves them. My son loves 90s culture, though he's coming later because he appreciates Nirvana and Alice in Chains, but he's a really big Foo Fighters fan.
Yeah, well, Ezra is by default a Foo Fighters fan because of Dave.
How can you not be, though?
Yeah.
They're fun.
Yeah.
But again, they're also talking about difficult things.
Well, the one who shall not be named, who left me for another country. She had a big thing for Dave.
Still smarts, don't it?
Like I said, the one who shall not be named.
Foo Fighters were fun, but Foo Fighters were weird because the music and what makes them so creative is the music and the lyrics are in tension with each other.
Yeah.
Because There Goes My Hero sounds really positive. You're like, that's so uplifting. Until you listen to the lyrics and it's like, oh my God.
Well, and I've said, here's the thing. I've always said that Everlong to me is probably the perfect love song ever written.
It is. I would agree with that.
And it's not a ballad.
It's not a ballad.
It's just, breathe out so I can breathe you in. That line alone. But I think one of the cool things about Foo Fighters is you got to see, over the course of the Foo Fighters journey, you got to see Dave Grohl mature as an artist.
How did he become that? To go from drumming for Nirvana?
He had, so the way he tells it, and I've seen several different interviews where he kind of says the same thing. So this is coming from, I actually believe him. He had already been writing stuff
when he was in Nirvana.
Yeah, and if you notice, a lot of the stuff on that first record sounds like Nirvana.
And it's because he was writing.
Because he was writing stuff that he wanted to give to Kurt, and some of the stuff Kurt liked, right? But then Kurt died, and Dave said for a long time after Kurt killed himself, he didn't want to do anything with music. He had a hard time listening to the radio. And then he started playing these songs again. And then he put a demo together. And the demo is actually the first record.
Wow. He's like W.B. Yeats, man.
Yeah.
He reinvents himself. He only does it twice. Yates did it 3 times. But
I think the Dave Grohl that we've got with the Foo Fighters, so the Dave Grohl we've got with Nirvana is that kid from D.C. who was a drummer for all these hardcore bands, who lucked into what would be the greatest position for a drummer in the last 40 years since the end of the Beatles. And then after that, when it all comes crashing down, he takes a step back and reinvents himself. And the Dave Grohl that we have now, I think, is the real Dave Grohl. And it's the Dave Grohl who's learned the system, learned the industry, and been able to use it to grow. Yeah, as an artist.
And they're refined too.
Yeah.
In that you would never mistake them for early 90s music.
No.
But the lyrics are so substantial.
Yeah.
They don't do frivolity.
No.
It's not in his DNA to write that kind of music.
Yeah.
But they sound like they've been refined, even though they're really not.
So I have to Foo Fighters, done. So I have to talk about
Next.
Pearl Jam.
Of course you do.
Because that's my guy.
I'll just sit back. Can I turn my mic off?
Well, no, and we talked about, like that moment, the first time I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit, and it is a weird feeling because you hear it and you're like, what is that? And it is shocking, it is processing. And then you want to hear it again, and I think it's the second or third time that you hear something like that you really start to appreciate. Well, this is huge. This is amazing. This is unlike anything I've ever heard. Because I think the initial hearing, you're not thinking, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard. And when I talk to people, and I actually give a talk about this, and because you've come to it, I can pinpoint that's the moment my life changed. But at that moment, I didn't know my life was changing.
No.
I didn't realize that shift was happening. It's only in hindsight you can look back and say, there's the moment. And it's the moment in that field house when I hear it for the first time, and it stops me dead in my tracks. Not because it's the most incredible thing I've ever heard before. It is because this doesn't sound right with what I'm seeing. It goes against everything I understand in the world. What is this? So with Pearl Jam, that was a different experience from Nirvana. Because with Nirvana, you're shocked. By the time I get into Pearl Jam, what happened was the first thing I ever heard was Even Flow. And, let me back up. I had seen Oceans and I'd seen Alive. I didn't like them. I didn't get it, right? It wasn't like, and it was kind of like the same thing with Alice in Chains. The first couple of Alice in Chains songs, I didn't get it. It was like, oh, okay, you're angry and you've got a raspy voice, right? But then I heard Even Flow. And I thought, this is actually kind of cool. And it had a really good swing to it. It had some great tempo. What hooked me was Jeremy. And the reason why Jeremy hooked me, and I've been all Pearl Jam ever since, Eddie is the guy, right? Like if Eddie Vedder walked in right now, I would still revert back to being 15 years old and faint. But the thing that got me with Jeremy is the crescendo, the building and the building and the building. And throughout that entire song, even today when I listen to that song, it amazes me how they're able to pack so much tension into that song to where when you get to the end,
when he shoots himself.
Yeah, when you get to the end, it releases, and it's one of the biggest releases in music. It just and it's just unbelievable.
Oh, it's smart. It
smart. Is.
It's art music.
It's incredible songwriting. And if you listen to, I don't know how they came up with this. If you listen to the riff versus the vocal melody that he puts on top of it, they don't match.
No, they don't.
But they work.
Yes.
It's unreal. And that's what hooked me with Pearl Jam. I was like, this is something special. And I have been a diehard. And then I went back and started to understand the beauty of Alive. And and I've made like one of my life sayings, I guess, is the opening line to Oceans. Hold on to the thread, the currents will shift.
So, but Jeremy was your entree into
that was Even Flow started to catch my attention, and I thought, well, maybe this band is pretty good. And then Jeremy came out. I was like, whoa, because at that point I was going through my REM phase, and then Jeremy knocked my socks off.
I think everyone went through an REM phase.
Yeah,
and there's another group that's challenging things.
Has always challenged things, but I think one of the things with REM is it becomes an afterthought.
Which is a shame.
And U2, well, okay, so U2 is problematic. U2 is problematic because it's alternative 5 years before the alternative breaks.
Yeah, but it's also
because I'd be lying if and I think you would be lying too if you said that the Joshua Tree didn't have any impact on your life.
I love that album.
It impacted everybody.
But then I heard The Clash and I realized what they were actually up to.
What was it? No, oh, okay. Did you, was it Henry Rollins said that The Clash is the band that U2 wanted to be?
And he's not entirely wrong.
Yeah.
Though they don't really sound like The Clash on Joshua Tree. Mm-mm. The problem with, I think, a lot of later U2 is that they become corporatized.
Yeah. Oh, Zoo TV is one of the worst, god-awful albums ever.
They surrendered themselves to
Octoon Baby was a great record.
They did a lot of great stuff before they finally, I don't want to say they sold their soul.
Yeah.
But I think they realized what they could do to make more money.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Well, they were the first band that I ever heard of selling their tickets for $100. The Stones weren't even doing that yet when U2 started doing that. And I'm like, who in the hell is going to pay $100 to see Bono?
Middle class kids who can.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to go to one of their shows. I didn't pay a dime for it. Some of my friends bought tickets and somehow got them cheap, and then they canceled because, and this is another sign, right, that they had lost their way. The reason they canceled the show is because their monitor broke, the video monitor, video screen, the Jumbotron wasn't working. And I'm thinking, my view of them changed overnight. Because my thought was, Nirvana doesn't need one.
Yeah.
What's your problem?
Yeah.
Because this was in 97?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things about all the times I've seen Pearl Jam live, there's no monitors. If there's any signage, it's not obtrusive, right? It's not like, it's not in your face. It's just the band. And they were one of the few bands that I can remember late where they would still have their half stacks on stage with them. And they'd just mic them right there on stage instead of hiding them backstage.
And connecting everything to a PA.
Yeah. It was still, they were still on stage. You could still see the orange half stack that Gossard had and the Marshall half stack that McCready had. And it was still, and Jeff Ament was still putting the little basketball figurines. And the last time I saw them was 2001 when Sarah and I went and saw them in Greensboro when she was pregnant with Luke. Luke's been to a Pearl Jam concert.
Wow.
In utero. Ironic. Isn't it?
Wow.
All right, so we got to talk about the sleeper bands real quick, and then we'll cut it. Toad the Wet Sprocket.
And see, that's just it. I forgot about them, but they are that good. I saw them live probably 4 years ago. he didn't miss a note.
Yeah.
And the talking about lyrics that are challenging and that force you to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The first Toad record I ever got was Pale.
It's a great album.
And I got it by accident because, okay, so there was this weird transaction between me and my younger brother. I bought Saigon Kick's Water. He bought Pale. He traded me Pale for Saigon. I liked Saigon Kick, but this Pale thing sounded kind of good, so we traded. So then, a little bit later, I decide, you know what? I want another copy of Saigon Kick. So I get another copy of Saigon Kick's Water. He bought 10. He lost his copy of Water. So he traded me for my copy of Water for 10. And that's how I ended up with my first copy of Pearl Jam's 10 and my copy of Toad the Wet Sprocket's Pale. I didn't buy either one of them. I just bought 2 copies of Saigon Kick's Water.
I have a story about which one has... I'm trying to think which one has this little release. Which album?
It's the In Light Syrup. It's the one, the Greatest Oil, the B-sides one. In Light Syrup.
Yeah, I can't tell you the story right now. I'll tell you afterward about a bet I lost.
About Burrito Supreme?
The bet I lost was, I can't tell you, but the consequence of the bet was I had to buy my roommate that album if I lost the bet. We made the bet the night before. I came back home. I didn't come back home that night, to give you an idea of what the bet might be about. And before the bet was, if you don't come back tomorrow, before you walk into this room, you've got to have a copy of that album. Don't say anything to me. Just put it on and start playing, and I'll know that you lost the bet. I lost the bet. I can't tell you what the bet was about.
We'll discuss it in a minute when we take a break.
But Toad, Counting Crows.
Counting Crows. Yeah.
Again,
okay. So August and Everything After. There's 2 albums in my entire life that I bought after hearing the song one time. Counting Crows was one of them. The first time, my best friend and I in high school had just left his house. We were going to go up to Stratford and go cruising. And we pull up to the stoplight above his house. And on 98.7, they started playing this song called Mr. Jones. Oh. And we were both like... And so we drove up. Instead of going up to Stratford, we went to Peaches, which was on Peters Creek Parkway. And we both got a copy of that album. We walked in. We were like, dude, we just heard this song. August and Everything After.
Murder of Crows is a great album, too.
Yeah.
Live on a Wire, I think, is their live album.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
I think so.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
In fact, the concert where I saw Toad, to give you an idea of how good the concert was, Toad opened for Crows.
Right. No, I remember I wanted to go to that concert and I didn't have the money. Of course, that was during the dark period.
Yes. The Empire. No.
The time of the Empire.
No,
Everything changed when the Sith Lord attacked.
I was not nearly as impressed by Counting Crows as I was Toad that night.
Yeah, you've told me about that.
He was so
Adam
high.
Duran's, yeah.
He was so high.
It was kind of like when I saw Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds. Nick Cave was so jacked. Yeah. It was awful.
I mean, he was gone, whereas Toad was on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, Counting Crows should have opened for Toad.
Yeah. Not
vice versa.
The other album I bought after hearing a song one time was Everclear, Sparkle and Fade. The first time I heard Santa Monica.
That's great.
Yeah, I heard that one. I was like, mm-hmm. But it's the only 2 albums I've ever bought after hearing the song one time.
Speaking of Santa Monica, what about Sheryl Crow?
My mother. That's why you brought it up. My mother hates Sheryl Crow.
Why?
I remember when I was watching VH1 one day, and this is when I was still at home. I think it was before I got kicked out, and because they let me come back a couple years later so I could go to college. after they kicked me. That's a long story. So I'm sitting there watching VH1 one day, and the song All I Want to Do was on. And I didn't know it, but she was standing behind me, and she was listening. And this is the same woman that threw away my first copy of Nevermind because it had the song Territorial Pissings. The Naked Baby's fine.
No problem there.
Yeah. But no son of mine is going to listen to music about peeing. But she's listening. And I got up and I was like, that is an awesome song. And I thought that Sheryl Crow was so hot. And she looks at me and she says, that is an awful song.
What about the song is awful?
Because all they do is drink all night. She talks about closing the bar.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. So, Pilot. Dude, Pilot. So anyway, so ever since then, my mother has had a bone. When she got with Lance Armstrong, when she was supposedly dating Dale Jr., anytime Sheryl Crow is single, she tells whichever girl I'm with at the time, be careful because that woman will come around and try and get her hooks into him too. And she calls her the hussy.
I don't think it would take a lot for the hooks to work. She was wonderful.
She was fantastic.
Saw her too. I saw her with Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
And she was great.
That makes a lot of sense.
That when you pair them both, talking about someone who transcends all decades and all music, it's got to be Willie Nelson.
It's Willie. Yeah.
We didn't talk about Tom Petty's '90s music.
No.
Free Falling.
They were together for 15 years when he finally did his first solo album.
Yeah. Full Moon Fever was a great. In fact, my mother bought me that album.
Really?
Because I'd mentioned I liked Free Falling.
Yeah.
And Running Down a Dream, and she fell in love with Tom Petty.
Is that the same one that's got Into the Great Wide Open?
No, that's later.
Okay.
And that, I think he's back with the Heartbreakers.
Right.
But Full Moon Fever is great because it's got songs like You're So Bad.
Yeah.
His lyrics can be fun too.
Yeah.
Like
The Last Dance with Mary Jane.
Yeah. One of my favorite songs is called You're So Bad. The lyrics are my sister got lucky, married a yuppie, took him for all he was worth. Now she's a swinger dating a singer. I can't decide which is worse. And it's all acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that album had an impact on me too. And that's actually, I discovered Bob Dylan via Tom Petty. Because I mentioned to my drama teacher how much I love Tom Petty. He's like, you got to listen to Bob Dylan.
I used to work with a guy who swore up and down that Tom Petty was Bob Dylan's illegitimate son, and they were just hiding it.
It makes so much sense. Either that or they're both illegitimate children of Woody Guthrie.
Right.
You could do an entire thing on Woody Guthrie.
I know.
With that wonderful sticker he had on his guitar, "This machine kills fascists."
Yeah.
I love Woody Guthrie. But he's a communist, so I would. I mean, he's fantastic. So no, there are a lot of groups we forgot.
Yeah.
Didn't talk about Cake.
No, we didn't. Well, or Tonic or Matchbox 20. Yeah.
There are a lot of great groups we didn't talk about.
Bon Jovi, Aerosmith.
Well, the reason talking about them is kind of like talking about Tom Petty. Their careers start well before.
Yeah, but when you look at Living on the Edge, that song from Get a Grip, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That was like, what, 92, 93?
It was, and it's ends with her flipping him off as she's jumped off the bridge, right?
Yeah.
Or the overpass.
Yeah.
And that's 90s music.
Yeah.
Love in an Elevator. 90s.
Well, Janie's Got a Gun from that was 88 from Pump.
Yeah. That's
powerful stuff. That was a very powerful
it's
song.
Not well, see, they did something unusual. They wrote really substantial music and then they wrote really frivolous music.
Yeah. Like Ragdoll.
On the same album, Ragdoll.
Living at a movie.
Yeah. And Love in an Elevator, which is just frivolous. I mean,
Dude Looks Like a Lady.
Dude Looks Like a Lady.
Yep.
Frivolous.
Yep.
And then they give you something like Janie's Got a Gun.
Yeah.
And it's surprising.
Or Living on the Edge.
It's surprising. We didn't talk about Weezer.
No, we didn't talk about Weezer. I remember when that record came out, there was this girl at Hardee's that I worked at Hardee's with. I had a big crush on, and she got into Weezer hard and fast.
I love Weezer.
We didn't talk about The Offspring.
No, we didn't.
We didn't talk about, and we didn't talk about Dave.
Well, we mentioned his name.
Yeah. But Under the Table and Dreaming had a huge impact on what was going on after Kurt.
It was lighter.
Yeah.
It was, I think it was a necessary antidote to the pain
well, it's
of
the pendulum
losing.
swing.
It is.
You know?
But you need something that's going to kind of help you survive it.
Mm-hmm.
There's I can't remember what, it's a CNN special on the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about music after 9/11, that not surprisingly it becomes a little more lighthearted because we need something to deal with the pain of 9/11.
We didn't talk about Dre.
No, we didn't.
The Chronic, I was a senior in high school when The Chronic came out, and I think I've told you about this before. One of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life is this kid in his big Chevy pickup with a rebel flag, and he is blasting Dr. Dre's Chronic as he comes into the parking lot at East Surrey High School.
Yeah.
And it didn't add up.
That's the very example of cognitive dissonance.
That's the very example of irony, according to Alanis Morissette. We didn't talk about that song.
Well, no, and I don't think we should. And she probably gets really tired of hearing that.
Well, no,
nothing in the song is ironic.
But I think that's the ironic part of the whole song.
You've made this argument before, and I really want it to be true.
Well, I'm sorry. Anybody who writes "You ought to know" or "Hand in my pocket" is smart enough to write ironic in a ironic sense.
It's very hipster in that regard.
It is.
No, we didn't talk about hip hop at all.
No.
And that's shameful.
And we didn't talk about the pop of the 90s. Because while all that's happening, Whitney and Mariah, they're gaining substantial ground. And Michael, at the same time, Michael is crashing.
Celine Dion
is
writing, is singing.
I am the greatest singer in the world. Anna Gasteyer on Saturday Night Live, when she did that, it was so good.
In fact, we didn't address pop at all.
No, because pop in the 90s takes a huge back seat. It got the wind knocked out of it.
Yeah.
And what you would consider pop today was masked as alternative to kind of slip it in so that people would listen to it, like Barbie.
Yep.
Right?
We didn't address Snoop Dogg.
No.
And he's absolutely, and his lyrics are kind of happy.
Yeah.
And
D-O-double-G.
You walk away from, after you listen to a Snoop song, you're like, I feel pretty good.
Well, it's
a little high, but I feel good.
And we didn't talk about Tupac.
We did not talk. Oh, yeah. Admittedly, our talk today's been kind of white.
Well, it has been, but I think one of the things you have to understand, I think we learned that with the TV thing, we're not going to be able to cover everything.
There's too much.
It's just too much.
You could do, and probably should do, an entire podcast just on hip hop of the 90s.
Well, you were talking about the CNN 90s thing.
Yeah.
There, I think at the end of the music one, you've got Chuck D from Public Enemy talking about his, like, you can talk about all these different bands, but the reality is you're not going to touch all of them. But what you can do is start a conversation with those bands, because with every band that you're talking about, there's 5 more just like them, or 5 more that are related to them that are just as good and made just an impact. Because during that entire, and one of the things that kind of caught me off guard, they're talking, Chuck D's on there talking about it. They're showing a picture of Rage Against the Machine. They never mention Rage. in the special.
We barely talked about it. We just used
Yeah.
their name once.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite
We didn't talk
groups.
about Tool.
We didn't talk about
Tool was one of mine. I love Tool. I love James.
You had to leave. You have to leave stuff out.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Coolio, and
No.
Coolio deserves a conversation.
Yeah.
If for nothing else, Gangster Paradise.
We did not. We are the only generation that truly, really appreciates Weird Al Yankovic because he came of age while we were growing up.
And he took these great songs and
Just made him
parodied them.
Oh, so good.
I'm fat.
Smells like Nirvana.
Yeah. Amish Paradise.
It's all about the Pentiums.
He is fantastic.
Eat It. What's the Like a Surgeon?
Like a surgeon.
But the other one is the one that got him famous was Another One Rides the Bus. All right, that's good. We're going to have to cut it off. We'll go 4 hours if we're not careful.
How long did we go?
I think an hour and a half, maybe hour 40.
Woo!
So yeah. All right, we'll be back next time is the internet, and that's part 4. So this is the end of part 3. So we're 3 down, 1 to go. We'll talk about the internet and video games because we started with Pong and we ended up with Tomb Raider. And talk about all that stuff in between. I don't think Jay's going to be talking much.
For what? The video games?
For the video games, yeah. Did you have a lot of video games?
I started out with the Atari,
Yeah.
and I got the Nintendo. I don't remember what was the first Nintendo.
Just the Nintendo,
I got that,
the NES.
and then in grad school I got me a PlayStation.
Yeah.
And I got a PS4 now, and we
Ooh.
have
That's what
we have a
got.
Nintendo
Well, we got
Switch.
3. Yeah.
But I'm
Do you
not,
actually use it?
I used to. I haven't touched it in months, but
Well, I just figured the migraines would probably keep you. From
well,
doing
it's the eye strain causes. I have to limit myself because my eyes have gotten worse over the years. That's something you probably haven't told them. Why I'm called the Optic Poet is because I'm visually impaired. That's how I like my irony.
By the way, that's your Instagram handle. That's where I got that.
Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
And then on Facebook, my description is I'm blind. I'm a poet. That's about it.
Blind crossing, is that what the sign says?
Yes.
That one
blind person area.
blind person area.
And this deeply offended a friend of mine. Deeply offended a friend of mine. I'm like, but I'm not offended. So
Yeah.
why are you upset?
You find the irony in it.
I thought it was absolutely hilarious,
It
and I
is.
did feel, in fact, like I had found my place in the universe. So now I'll have some things to say about
well,
video
and to be
games.
fair, with my vertigo, I can't play like the boys and I will sit down and we'll play like Call of Duty.
Ooh.
And after about a half hour, it's starting to wear on me and I start to lose balance.
I would love to play Skyrim. I really would, and I've
Yeah.
tried because it's such a fantastic storyline, and the universe is massive. I would love to play Xenoblade, which is
Yeah.
my son's favorite game, but again, it's too taxing.
Mhm.
And afterward, I have to close my eyes.
Yeah.
I have gotten migraines from it before,
Yeah.
so I have to be cautious. But I
Yeah.
know a lot about the video game scene. That's fun.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. All right. Make it a great day, guys. We'll see you next time.
Now it's time for Dr. J.